Good morning, everybody. Oh, we're excited. We're going to talk about linguistics today. I love the enthusiasm. And basically, you're going to get my 3-year degree from Durham University condensed into 1 hour. All right, everybody, so strap in. Here we go. Does anybody know how many languages there are in the world? Correct. Let's throw out a number. 243. Incorrect. Yes. At the back. Hand up. Yes.
3,220.
Higher.
20,000.
Love your. Once upon a time there was. It's okay. It's in between 5 and it's in between 10. Let's have another guess. 7,164 languages spoken across the world. And I'm going to ask you one more question, and Janice is not allowed to answer this question. She knows the answer. Does anybody know what country has the most amount of languages spoken in? Not China. Africa is not a country. Not India, not Australia, not Ghana, not Brazil. Yeah, Uganda, incorrect. Incorrect. It's Papua New Guinea. Which is why Janice wasn't allowed to answer the question, because she lived there for a while. It's Papua New Guinea. Who'd have thought it? Do you want to know why really quickly? It's because it's a very mountainous region. And for a long time, the transport between the mountainous valleys was not really possible. So the tribes and the communities that lived there just formed their own language. And you might think, oh, yeah, but is it like Portuguese and Spanish because they're kind of related? No. They're as different as Japanese is to Italian. That's how different and diverse there are. 839 languages in PNG. 839. The most widely language spoken in the world? Mandarin. It's Mandarin. English is the second most widely spoken language, but actually it's Mandarin. Yes, hello.
Do you have a sheet on all this?
Oh, we can arrange something. We can do that. I thought you were going to actually heckle me then and say, no, there's not. So there are over 7,000 languages that are spoken across the world. But thousands and thousands of languages are extinct. And that means that languages when they're not being learned as a native speaker when you're little, if that is not the first language that you're learning, that language will eventually die out. So there was a Welsh revival of the Welsh language. Cornish is dying. There are only 800 speakers of Cornish right now. Gerriere in the great island of Jersey, Gerriere is dying out as well. And a very sad fact that about one language dies about every 14 days. Because it's easier to learn the language of commerce, which is English, or the other major language in your area. And so it's really tragic, because when a language dies, we're going to get onto this, a whole way of being, a whole culture dies as well. There has been one language that's been made up. Esperanto, yes! Yeah, there are about 500,000 speakers, and 2 feature films have been done in this language. I've never heard of them, not going to lie. The Bible is available in 2,454 languages. And when you think there are over 7,000 languages, it's not much, is it? It's not even half. A few other fun facts. South Africa has 11 official languages. The US has no official language. Read into that what you want. In the Vatican City in Rome, you can use the ATM in Latin. That was a fun fact. I thought it was a fun fact. And the official language of India The official language is actually English, because there are about 254 languages in India, and they couldn't agree which one should be the official one. So they went, let's just compromise and have everybody's second language as the official one. Okay, they were my fun facts. There we go. What makes a language a language? All languages have something called verbs, which are traditionally we describe as a doing word. I am running. I am speaking. I am nervous, all those kind of things. And they also have nouns, which are traditionally described as naming words, chair, computer, sky, but also concepts like idea, etc. All languages also have grammar. Okay, fun fact for you, there's no such thing as incorrect grammar. It's all dialectal. That's what you can say. It's just my way of speaking. You can't tell me that I'm wrong. So that is a linguistic fact. And I'm looking at all the school teachers, Naomi, you're rolling your eyes at me. Some languages have more complicated grammars than others. So, for example, Turkish has over 100 tenses. Finnish has 850. And now, if you don't know what a tense is a way to describe when an event took place in a period of time. So, I'm sitting on a chair. I sat on the chair. I will sit on the chair. So it's about that, how you place that period in time. Hebrew has only 2 tenses. And the tenses are completed, the action being completed, I've sat on the chair, and the action not yet completed. I have not yet sat on the chair. And it's quite difficult to translate that into English, but Hebrew, it makes a lot of sense. They only have 2 tenses, completed, not completed. So actually, when it comes to translation and linguistics, how do you convey the concept which we have in English of the future tense? Tomorrow I will sit on the chair, because that construction does not exist in Hebrew. Can you see some of the problems? It's complicated. And then English, oh my Lord. It's bonkers. It's one of the worst languages. It's a hodgepodge of everything. But one of the things that makes English very, very difficult is English is one of the only languages, a very small amount, which are word order specific. So if I said to you, the cat sat on the mat, the only way that sentence makes sense is because of the word order that it is in. So if I said to you, on the mat, the cat sat, doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Most languages have the grammar embedded inside the word, so it doesn't matter which order you put it in, that you can make sense out of it. But English, no. It has to be in the right order for it to make any sense. Are you with me so far? Yes. All right, okay. Another specific thing which makes languages unique, our languages are a combination of what we call production. This is what's going on here. And that happens in area 44, in the brokers area here, and comprehension, which happens in the Wernicke's area, area 51 here. So if somebody's had a stroke, okay, and they lose the language capacity, they will either have lost their broker's part, which means that their production is gone, so they can understand what's going on, but they can't reply back. You might have seen that. Or their Wernicke's has been turned off, and their production is still there, which means that they can speak, but it's gobbledygook, it's babbling, because that comprehension, and the two work together. All languages have a combination of sounds made with our mouth and our larynx here. And there are hundreds and hundreds of different ways that we can make sounds, and linguists call this a phoneme, okay? They call these phonemes. And each phoneme has its very own unique set of DNA. And I'm not going to bore you with that. I had to learn it all off by heart. You don't need to know that, don't worry. You can still get your degree. Every single language has its own unique set of phonemes. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. How many vowels does English have? Wrong. We have 5 written vowels, but actually, phonetically, we have 26. And this is, if you don't believe me, this is how. Right, who's from the north? How do you say, if you're going to have not a shower, but you lie down in it, what's it called? It's called a bath. All right, southerners, where are you? Where are you? What do you call it? Yeah, the bath. So they are different. They're different phonemes because they sound different. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So when children grow up, when they're born and they learn language, it's amazing. It's incredible. And these 2 areas here that we talked about, the language faculties, they turn on and go into overdrive during the first 3 years of growing. And babies will watch and learn, and they'll watch your mouth to see what's happening, which is why babies stare at you like, ah, to find exactly what is going on and how you're making these sounds. And if that is how babies learn language, and the phonemes that you make with your mouth, they will pick up, which means that children learn languages like that. And it also means that they don't have accents. So if I was to try and speak French, I would have a terrible English accent when I try to speak French because I wasn't exposed to those phonemes as a baby. But I was exposed to Tamil phonemes because of my dad, which means that the small amount of Tamil and Sinhala that I can speak, I don't sound like an English person because I know how to make those make those noises. So here's an example. So in Sinhala and in Tamil, which is what they speak in Sri Lanka, they don't have the phonemes th for like thought. I can't think of anything that begins with th now. Think, all, yeah. And they also don't have the phoneme w, like what, where, when, water. So when you hear a Sri Lankan try and speak English with those words, because they don't have those phonemes, they'll go water. Because they can't do the w, they'll go water. Because they don't know how. And similarly, if English is your native language and you're trying to pronounce some of the Sri Lankan phonemes, you'll sound like an idiot. Another famous one. So in Asia, they don't have the phonemes L, the L, and they don't have the R. So there's the famous borderline racist of the sticky fried rice, the sticky lied rice, because they just don't have it. It's very, very, very difficult for them because they just don't have it. So that's a bit of background to linguistics. Is everybody with me? Yeah, still? You're okay? All right, okay. Now, this bit is relevant, but it's not relevant, but it's fun. I'm going to talk a little bit about gender and language and how men's language is different to women's language. And this is, I promise you, you're going to go back to your church councils. And you're going to remember what I've said. And you'll be like, oh my goodness, she was right. Men and women, we speak differently. We do. And the way that we use language is very, very different. There are obvious things, like the different pitch, but we also have a different pace. and we have a different volume. But the way that language is received and used is also very, very, very different. And this traditionally, well, scholars think that when we were hunter-gatherers, traditionally they thought the men went out to hunt and they had to be quiet, otherwise they'd frighten off the antelope or whatever. But women were they were the gatherers, looking after the children, catching the berries. And what did they do? Talk to each other. Yeah, which is why we're better at pretty much everything, really. But, you know. So here are some of the differences between men and women's speech. Men's topics, if you're in a meeting, a man's topic, if they introduce it, it will be pursued. You watch. But if a woman introduces a topic, not very often, it will just get spoken over and it will get ignored. Men's style is compared to being the powerful one in the relationship. Women are generally a lot more polite. A lot more polite in a conversation and in a meeting. And we swear less as well. We swear a lot less, women do. Interruptions. Now, this is really fascinating, okay? Women interrupt a lot less than men. We don't do it generally. But if a woman tries to interrupt a man, he will keep going. Yeah? But if anybody interrupts a woman, 9 times out of 10 they stop. Yeah? Watch that. It's fascinating. Men, we might be talking about, you know, linguistics or something, but if we were in a meeting, a church council, yeah, and then a man interrupts, he can change the topic like that. And the whole group will move to that conversation. But if a woman does it, it doesn't happen. It's really, you might be like, what? Trust me, there is decades of evidence of this. Watch when you get home. Men are very, very comfortable with silence, but women generally aren't. So have you ever noticed this? You're in a conversation and there's a silence and you go, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah. It's what we do. It's because women generally don't feel comfortable with that silence and they want to fill it somehow. And they fill it with those fillers. Yeah. And when we're having a conversation with somebody, we will show that we're listening by going, yeah, yeah. Men, I don't know. Okay, that was completely irrelevant to what I'm talking about, but I think it's really interesting. So yeah, there we go. Anyway, right, back in the room. We're doing back into our degree. Here we go. So we've talked about the science of language, and we've talked about phonemes, and we've talked about grammar, we've talked about how it's processed. But then language is used in society, and it's used for a reason, and it's used because it's a means of communication. But language has changed over the centuries. Anybody study Shakespeare? Ugh. I'm delighted for you. That's nice. Shakespeare is not Old English. It is early modern English. There is something called Middle English, which is older than Shakespeare. And there's something called Old English, which if you saw Old English written down, you wouldn't recognize it. You wouldn't recognize it. I studied Old English. If we've got time, I might read you some Beowulf. People are having panic attacks over. But the question is, when language changes, is it process? Is it a good thing? Is it change? Is it a good change? Or is it decay? Is it mean, these changes that are happening to language is dying because we're not using the same, It's not as good as it used to be. You know what I mean, don't you? Yeah. Is it process or is it decay? And historians and traditionalists have lamented and celebrated language change. There was a very, very famous writer who bemoaned one of the significant changes in language that happened in the English language mediumly recently. And he argued that this one person was single-handedly ruining the English language. Do you know who that person who wrote was? It was Shakespeare. They were complaining that Shakespeare was ruining the English language with all the changes that he brought into our language. But we change for a reason. 20, 30 years ago, we didn't need the words, the Google, the Twitter, the Facebook, the TikTok, and all these other things. We didn't need them because they didn't exist. But actually, we do need them now. I mean, I'm going to bet that y'all use those words from time to time. And then every now and again, every 6 months, the Oxford English Dictionary will announce which new words they've added to their dictionary. Do you want to know what was added quite recently? Well, I'm going to tell you anyway, so... Thank you. The new word rizz, which is what the kids are using, it's short for charisma. I know, yeah, I feel old. Yeah. It's like R-I-Z-Z. So like, oh my goodness, Mum, you've got some rizz about you. Which means that, Mum, you've got some charisma about you. Deep fake, have you heard of that word? It's been added to the dictionary, but 10 years ago didn't exist. Confuddle. Yeah, you can get that. Gazillion. Okay, this is going to sort out the sheep and the goats. Swifty. All right, so there's some Taylor Swift fans out there. A petfluencer. So not an influencer, but somebody who does an influencing one about their pets. Yeah. My favourite one, speed run. The art of memorising a computer game in order to complete it in the shortest amount of time possible. Language changes. Language changes. And like I said yesterday, think about when you were growing up. Yeah? The language that you used in your school with your friends, it was different, and you wanted to make it different to make you stand out from your mother and your father and your parents and your grandparents and the people in authority. It's very, very natural. But your parents despaired. I promise you, they despaired at the language you were using, and your grandparents were weeping. But it is a question. Is it process or is it decay? Okay, now park that thought, because we're going to take a big gear shift, and all of the things that we've talked about are going to come into their own. It's going to make sense now. One of the challenges with language is that each language is unique. We've learned that it's got its own unique grammar, its own unique phonemes, but it also is unique because it serves a purpose and a people. Language is amazing, but it gets sticky when we talk about culture, okay? So the definition of culture, there isn't a definition of culture. What is it? Different academics will all argue that their definition of culture is the right one. So psychologists would argue that it's a system of understanding each other. Sociologists would argue that culture is a system of participation. So, you know, for example, if you go to somebody's house, what do you say? Would you like a cup of tea? That is our culture. That is our culture. And that's that participation, that I go into your house, you offer me a cup of tea. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, yeah. Have you eaten if you're from the north? Definitely. There are many arguments about what culture is. Now, linguists, we argue that the best and only definition of culture is reflected in the language. That our culture is so wrapped up in our language that you can't have one without the other. The two cannot exist. Because otherwise, how do you express anything? You can't say, would you like a cup of tea, or have you eaten? Without language. You can't do it. So we say that ours is the best definition. We use words to express our culture and our thoughts, but we do it in a way where language serves our unique needs as a culture. Now, this is a big concept. Let me help you understand this. So, in the Inuit language, where they have a lot of snow in like Alaska and other places. We all know where Alaska is, don't we? Yeah, okay. So we basically have one word for snow, don't we? Snow. In the Inuit language, they have 15 different words to describe the different types of snow. Fresh snow, snow floating on a water, snow clinging with debris, snow that's had dog pee in it. And they have one word to describe all that. So they have one word to describe snow which has debris clinging onto it, but we have a whole sentence. Can you see the difference? And they need those words because they deal with a lot of snow. They have lots of different types of snow. So in Tagalog, in the Philippines, they have 20 different words to describe sand. Well, we've just got sand. They have compact sand, sand that's just been dug by a crab, wet sand, fresh sand, all sorts of different types of words to describe the different types of sand because they need it. Okay? Are you with me? Yeah. And you might think, well, why? We have exactly the same in England and in English. Not England, English. So, this is my favourite one to just help you understand. Can we think of different words for rain? We can, can't we? Because there are different types of rain out there, aren't there? So, my favourite one from Norfolk, it's mizzle. It's mizzling out there. There's a downpour. It's a deluge. It's drizzle. It's spitting. It's fine. It's trying. It's chucking it down. It's tipping. It's pelting. It's torrential. It's luttering. It's silling. It's plothering. It's grizzerable. It's mawky. That is I can't remember which region that's from. But you all get the point, don't you? And there is a difference between spitting and tipping. And you know what those differences are because you're a native speaker of English and because you know the different types of rain. But if we were in the Philippines and I was trying to explain this in Tagalog, I would be trying to explain what does spitting it mean? It's like not, And they'd be like, what language do these crazy people speak? But can you see how language is really wrapped up in the culture in which you live and exist in? So, have I convinced you about that? Yes. All right, okay. Because this is where it gets really difficult. Because if each language has its own unique phonemes, its own rules, kata on mat, and its own culture, its spitting, all of those three things mixed in together, if language seeks to serve the people who use it, so we know what it means when I say it's raining. I mean, can you imagine trying to translate that? The question is, with all of those things, how do you translate? It's really, really difficult because philosophically, we understand the concepts in our native language because we were brought up, we grew up with it. So we talked about the Hebrew only having 2 tenses. There's no present tense. You cannot be sitting on the chair in Hebrew. So how do you translate that if that concept doesn't exist? How do you translate the concept of spitting, pelting? It's a really, really big problem. Now, linguists, we disagree on a lot of things, but there is one thing that we do agree on. There is no such thing as pure translation. It's not possible. It's not possible. You can have a really good stab at it, but you will come with a bias, and you will come with your culture, and you will come to the translation with all of that, and the languages that you are trying to translate from might not match up grammatically. The Hebrew. Can you imagine? Oh my Lord. Could you imagine translating from Finnish, 850 tenses, to Hebrew with 2? It's tough. So let's take our raining cats and dogs, because you all know what that means, don't you? You all know what I mean by it's raining cats and dogs outside. We all know what it means, but how do you go about translating that into another language? So there is a spectrum in translation that we talk about as linguists. You can either go for this side, and it's called a sense for sense translation. So you're going to look at the phrase, it's raining cats and dogs. Okay. I know that what the author is trying to convey here, it's really raining very, very, very heavily. That's the sense. That's the purpose of that sentence. Are we agreed with that? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to think of another phrase in my target language which reflects really, 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 really heavy rain. Yeah? So I'm going to use that, but it doesn't use the words cats and dogs. It uses something else. Are you with me? That is a sense for sense translation. The translator said, this is the idea that they're trying to portray, and I'm going to portray that idea in this language, which I know will make sense to these people. But is it a translation? It is and it isn't. Can you see the problem? Can you see the problem? It is a translation because the concept is being translated, but actually, you're not translating those words. But similarly, so that's one end of the spectrum, and then there's this end of the spectrum, which is word-for-word translation. So the translator decides to go for the literal word-for-word translation. So, cats and dogs. It's raining cats and dogs outside. So if I was to translate that into French, it is raining. Les chiens et les chats outside. I didn't do French. So I've translated it word for word, but does it make sense? No. So neither one is satisfactory. Okay, let's take a quick vote. Hands up if you want the sense for sense. If you prefer that one. Oh. Hands up if you want the word for word. Okay, it's curious. Okay, it's Madeline, like you're a Lone Ranger. It's fine. It's okay. Hands up if you're just confused. It's really hard because translation is actually really complicated, and the raining cats and dogs is a great example. And here's the killer. The Bible. Yeah. If you didn't know this, this is going to blow your mind. The Bible wasn't written in English. It wasn't. It's been translated by somebody, and usually a man. But it gets worse. It gets worse. It was written thousands and thousands of years ago, and we know that language changes. We don't speak Old English anymore, and people don't speak biblical Hebrew, and we don't speak biblical Greek anymore because those languages have changed. I learned biblical Greek at theological college, but when I went to Greece, my husband was like, "I will be all right." I'm like, I couldn't read it. It made no sense to me whatsoever. But you put a Greek New Testament in front of me, and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. If you really don't believe me, I'm going to read you some Old English now. See if you understand it. Hewat hier gara dne gerendigum. Fio firum gerefrenum. Hu fa heferlingus ilon frimiodum. Oft skyla skrifing skefene fermentum monegum morpheum modesilo of thea. That was English. Oh, thank you. That was English about 1,500 years ago. Language has changed. That was English. There. Do you know what? When I did my degree, I could translate that now, but the Old English is gone and the Greek's gone in. I'll find out for you later. Fun fact. You're welcome. So, okay, translation, back in the room. Language changes. Translation is hard. Are we all agreed on that? Okay. Fun fact. There are over 200 translations of the Bible into English. Just English. Just English. Why? Because there's no such thing as pure translation. They all have their different slants, and they all have their different interpretations. So in our sense for sense, we might have the message. This is the idea that I think the gospel writers are trying to get across. And I'm going to use modern language to get the idea across. And on the other end of the spectrum, well, maybe the NRSV to a degree, but there are still problems. I would go as far as an interlinear translation, which has the Greek and then the raw English, not in the right order underneath it. But are you feeling uncomfortable yet? Good. How do we translate the Bible? It is really problematic because it is a dead language. There are no native speakers, and we just do our very, very best. The culture, do you remember our conversations about the culture? That culture does not exist. We are not in the Bronze Age anymore, and we are not in first century Palestine under Roman occupation. There is no such thing as pure translation. So you might be sat there thinking, like, Jenny, you're ruining my faith here. You're ruining it. As Christians, we rely on the Holy Spirit to help us do that translation. But where does that leave us now? And what has that got to do with this whole weekend? Where am I going with this? Language is complicated. It's not straightforward. And how we interpret and how we understand is all contextual, and it changes every day. There are words that were acceptable to use 100 years ago in our everyday language that are not acceptable now. I mean, you don't need me to tell you what they are, and I'm not, because I want to keep my job. But you all know what they are. But that language continues to change. And sometimes, as we talked about last night, words are so culturally entwined that they might hurt some people and not others. But you might think, well, it doesn't hurt me, so why does it hurt you? And we just don't know people's background. We don't know their baggage. We don't know what's going on. But actually, part of our responsibility as Christians who use language is being open to the idea that our language is very, very powerful. We can cut somebody with our words, or we can heal somebody with our words. And even if you think, well, I don't know why this person finds that word offensive, and I just think, rah, 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 you've still got a choice whether you use those words or not. You can cut, or you can heal. Language is complicated, and it's open to changes. And whether you like it or not, language changes. When we use language, we always have an agenda, because that is the point of communication. I am trying to convey my thoughts, my agenda, over to you, and I do it with language. Words create worlds, and that's how we communicate. I'm trying to convey my world to you when I use this amazing thing called language. The Bible creates a world, and when we translate it, we create a whole new world. But we've learned that it's not as straightforward as we think it is. It's not as straightforward as we've been led to believe. So when somebody comes up to me at church and says, well, I've read it, and it says so in the Bible, it says this, I'm like, well, does it now? We've learned that language and translation is far more complicated, and the impact that it has on us as Christians who engage with the Bible, but also as Christians who have the power of language to heal, is very, very, very significant. Becca's going to be talking about that in our next session. But I'm going to start. We'll start drawing us into land. My husband's a pilot. ATCs have just called. We've got clearance to land, so we're on the final approach. So to finish with, I wanted to share with you a bit of humour. Okay. Do you remember our cat sat on the mat example? Okay. So if the phrase, the cat sat on the mat, appeared in the Bible, and there was a Bible study, and different theologians and different churches wanted to wrestle with this great theological concept of the cat sitting on the mat. Are you ready? Okay. How would the church deal with the phrase, the cat sat on the mat, if it appeared in the Bible? Well, the liberal theologians would point out that such a passage did not, of course, mean that the cat literally sat on the mat. Also, cat and mat had different meanings in those days from today, and anyway, the text should be interpreted according to the customs and practices of the period of the said cat sitting on the said mat. This would lead to an immediate backlash from the more fundamental wing of the church. They would make an essential condition of faith that a real, physical, living cat, being a domestic pet of the Felis domesticus species, having whiskered head and a furred body, 4 legs and a tail, was physically placed, the whole body on the floor covering, every single church service. It was designed and destined, because it says so in the Bible, that every service should have a cat sitting on a mat, but not on the floor. because the mat is on the floor but not of the floor. And then the expression on the floor but not of the floor would be explained in a leaflet you could get handed out. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church. Hey, we love the Catholics, we love the Catholics. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church would have they would have developed the Festival of the Sedentation of the Blessed Cat. And this would teach that the cat was white and majestically reclined on a mat of gold thread before its assumption to the great basket of heaven. And this is commemorated by the singing of the Magnificat. Okay. With the lighting of 3 candles and ringing a bell 5 times. I've got more, calm down. This would create a schism with the Orthodox Church, which believes in the tradition requiring Holy Cat's Days to be marked with lighting of 6 candles and ringing of the bell only 4 times. And this would be partly resolved by the Cuckoo Land Declaration recognizing the traditional validity of each. Eventually, the Anglicans would get on board, and the Anglican bishops would issue a statement of the doctrine of the feline sedentation, and it would explain that traditionally the text describes a domesticus feline quadruped superjacent to an unattached covering on a fundamental service for determining its salvific and eschatological significance. We, therefore, will now follow a heuristic analytical principles adopted in dealing with the canine fenestration question. How much is that pussy in the window? And this would go on for a further 210 pages. And then the Church of England would commend this report and make it into a helpful resource designed for the clergy to help explain to the person in the pew the difficult doctrine of the cat sat on the mat in the Bible. And then finally, the Methodist Conference. What would the conference do? Well, the Methodist Conference would set up a working party. The conference would set up a working party to report back to conference in 3 years' time. On the discrimination felt by mat-less cats within the church. They would also produce a service involving lighting 1 candle and inviting everyone to sit around on their own mat on the 2nd and 4th Sundays. Each month, the cat on the 5th Sunday would be replaced by a mouse on a mouse mat. Because the Methodist Church believes in inclusion. It is believed that this new form of worship will make the church relevant to modern youth culture, and a fresh expression of church would be founded, and a new connectional post would be created to eventually help lost cats and worn-out mats reach their full potential in the light and love of Christ. Okay, if I offended you, I'm deeply, deeply sorry. That was not my intention. I'm deeply apologetic. It was just a bit of fun. But it just goes to show how one word, how one phrase in the Bible can, well, yeah. And when we come to the power of words creating worlds and the problem of translation, And the challenge of being in the church is really complicated. It's really complicated. I've given you a lot to think about. Becca's going to come and share with us some stories about how words create worlds and some real-life experiences of the impact and the power of language. And then on Sunday, when you're going to bring your pen, yeah, we're going to have a go at doing some translation ourselves. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. We're going to do it together. I'm going to give you a little warning of how it's going to work out now, so you're not going to be too stressed. So you're all... Hang on a minute. Okay, Lord, you gave me this dumb idea. Please make it work, amen. So you're going to get given a booklet, and then on the Sunday morning, we're going to go through the booklet together, and it's really clearly colour coordinated. It's going to be okay. So there is a Greek word. It doesn't matter, you can't read it. It doesn't matter, because each word has its own colour, and then there is a dictionary definition of that word. All you have to do is read what translations there are of that word and go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I think I like this translation of this word, okay? And then you go to the next one and you think, I think I like this translation of this word, because the word father, our father, the Greek is pater. It doesn't just mean father. There are about 12 different words you can use. And so I'm going to present you with those words, and you're going to pick which one you like. And then you're going to do that for each word, and then you're going to stitch it together. It's going to be okay. You can do it in a pair. You don't have to do it by yourself. Oh, you look really scared. Thank you for the enthusiasm. Okay, so that is a little warning of what we're going to do tomorrow. It's not a test. It's not an exam. It's just a way to help you understand how complicated translation is, and that we're going to have 200 different versions of the Lord's Prayer by the end of the day. We're not going to read them all out. Don't worry. But we might share one or two. You can work in a pair. You can work in a group. The idea is to get you talking. Two words are better than one. It's about getting you talking about the complexities of translation and helping you really understand that one word does not translate. It's raining cats and dogs. We know it. So have a little go. Tomorrow, when you get your booklets, I'm going to explain it again really clearly, and it'll make so much more sense when you've got them in front of your hands. But I'm just like, we are women. We're amazing. You are amazing people. We're going to smash this. All right? And my mum helped me make this. It makes sense, doesn't it, Mum? She's like, yep. All right, okay. We are wrapping up. I hope you've learnt something. I hope you've been challenged. I hope you feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's what I like to do. And I hope you're excited. And I hope that your understanding of language has been transformed, and that your understanding of the power of words has also been challenged as we continue to go through this journey together. I will have a chat with the powers that be to get some of my fun facts. And would you like how the church would deal with the phrase "cat sat on the mat"? You're all going to put that in the church notices, aren't you? In the magazine. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's time for a coffee. So please make use of the facilities here. If you want to stretch your legs, go down. And we're meeting promptly at 11:15. Thank you. Thank you.